As Russian forces pushed toward Kyiv in early 2022, Ukraine rushed to hold the capital before the columns reached its outskirts. Ukraine's strategy was simple: slow the armoured columns, choke the roads, and force Russia into terrain where vehicles stalled. Near Hostomel airport, special forces fought fiercely to stop Russian airborne units from securing a gateway to Kyiv. The battle raged for hours. Ukraine's resistance denied Russia a crucial landing zone, disrupting their planned encirclement. North of Kyiv, villages like Bucha and Irpin became choke points. Narrow streets trapped long armoured columns. Ukrainian ambush teams used the terrain, striking fast from hidden positions before disappearing into ruined buildings. The closer Russian forces got, the harder the resistance became. Each street turned into a defensive fortress. By the end of the first week, Russia's advance slowed dramatically. Kyiv stood firm. Ukraine's ambushes forced Russian units to slow down, disrupting their tight advance toward Kyiv's northern edges. Reports from civilians warned defenders of new enemy routes, allowing them to reposition quickly in the forests. Using local knowledge, Ukrainian units set layered traps along choke points, bridges, and narrow woodland lanes. Russian vehicles, unprepared for such terrain, struggled through the icy roads, becoming easier targets for defenders. Ukrainian anti-armor teams moved swiftly between firing positions, striking and disappearing before return fire arrived. Their hit-and-run tactics slowed the entire Russian column, forcing constant regrouping and costing precious time. Every minute gained allowed Kyiv's defenses to strengthen, giving Ukraine a crucial advantage in the early days. By the second day, Russian forces found themselves moving slower than planned, their advance bleeding momentum. Ukrainian commanders quickly adapted, using small mobile units to strike at isolated vehicles on forested roads. Ambushes near Ivankiv and Hostomel forced Russian units to reroute, stretching their supply lines dangerously thin. With supplies delayed, Russian crews struggled to refuel, repair vehicles, and maintain cohesion in freezing conditions. Meanwhile, Ukrainian artillery teams targeted clogged roadways, hitting convoys that had nowhere to maneuver. These strikes destroyed vital vehicles, deepening the chaos already spreading through the Russian advance routes. Ukrainian drone spotters, working in secrecy, guided artillery fire with remarkable accuracy from hidden shelters. Every strike further stalled the invaders, giving Kyiv crucial time to assemble stronger defensive lines. The plan was working: slow the advance, cut supplies, and force Russian forces into vulnerable choke points. Ukrainian resistance groups inside nearby towns sabotaged fuel trucks and marked enemy positions for artillery. Small acts of sabotage created major disruptions, leaving convoys immobilized and commanders scrambling for order. Russian units continued pushing forward, but now faced ambushes from every angle, eroding their confidence. Each stalled kilometre brought greater panic. Maps meant to guide a fast march now showed choke points and danger zones. Ukrainian defenders used natural terrain, frozen rivers, tight woods, steep banks, to funnel the enemy into traps. At several crossings, explosives detonated beneath advancing vehicles, scattering crews and blocking entire routes. With every destroyed bridge and burned truck, Russia's timetable collapsed, forcing them into desperate improvisation. Ukraine had transformed the northern approach into a maze of ambushes and delays, draining the invasion's momentum. Near Kyiv's outskirts, territorial defense units fortified neighborhoods, turning streets and alleys into defensive zones. Civilians carried supplies to the front, helping defenders hold their positions despite relentless pressure. Families sheltered underground as the distant sounds of battle crept closer to Kyiv's northern districts. Above them, defense forces positioned anti-tank teams along key streets, preparing for urban confrontation. Meanwhile, Russian forces attempted to regroup north of Kyiv, but their formations remained disorganized and exposed. Fuel shortages worsened, leaving parts of the Russian column stranded for hours with engines running low or dead. Ukrainian scouts observed the struggling forces, marking new targets as Russian frustration grew more visible. With enemy momentum fading, Ukraine prepared its next phase: striking harder to force a full retreat. Ukraine launched coordinated counterstrikes, hitting stalled Russian units before they could reorganize or repair vehicles. Precision mortar teams targeted choke points, trapping Russian vehicles in tight forests with no room to maneuver. Each strike forced Russian soldiers to abandon vehicles, leaving equipment scattered across the frozen landscape. Ukrainian units advanced cautiously, securing disabled vehicles and clearing paths through the debris-strewn woods. Some vehicles were repaired and reused, providing Ukraine with unexpected reinforcements captured from the invaders. Other vehicles were destroyed intentionally to prevent reuse, blocking key roads for hours as crews cleared wreckage. Russian forces, low on fuel and coordination, became increasingly vulnerable to rapid Ukrainian assaults. Ukraine's mobility and timing turned the battlefield in their favour, striking wherever enemy lines looked weakest. As pressure shifted, Ukrainian units pushed northward, aiming to break the already fractured Russian advance routes. Recon teams reported collapsing morale among Russian troops, many forced to abandon positions during freezing nights. Ukrainian snipers took key vantage points, targeting officers and drivers to further disrupt coordination. Every precise hit deepened the confusion, forcing Russian units to halt or retreat under mounting pressure. Night raids intensified, with Ukrainian units striking supply points to keep enemy logistics in constant turmoil. Explosions lit the night sky as ammunition depots and fuel reserves erupted under focused Ukrainian strikes. By destroying supplies, Ukraine forced Russian troops to endure shortages that crippled their ability to continue. These coordinated strikes made one truth unavoidable. The once rapid Russian advance was grinding to a halt. As Russian advances stalled, Ukrainian forces seized the initiative, launching counterattacks along key northern routes. These counterattacks aimed not only to slow the enemy, but to reclaim territory lost during the first days of fighting. Russian forces attempted to reinforce their stalled positions, but supply trucks rarely reached the front intact. With every failed delivery, Russian troops grew more isolated, lacking food, fuel, and clear communication. Meanwhile, Ukrainian units expanded their presence along forest lines, preparing coordinated multi-direction attacks. These coordinated movements allowed Ukrainian forces to strike vulnerable positions simultaneously across the front. On several fronts, Russian troops were caught off guard, retreating in confusion as Ukrainian fire intensified. What once looked like a swift march toward Kyiv was now a grinding struggle that exposed deep flaws in the invasion. Russian vehicles clogged narrow routes, creating massive traffic jams that left entire columns exposed to attack. Ukraine exploited this paralysis, striking immobilized units with artillery, anti-tank teams, and precise ambushes. Some convoys were abandoned entirely as crews retreated into forests, leaving equipment for Ukraine to capture. Captured supplies, including fuel, helped Ukrainian forces maintain tempo as Russian movements slowed drastically. In many sectors, Ukraine now held the advantage, pressing forward while Russian forces struggled merely to regroup. As columns collapsed, coordination broke down entirely, leaving isolated pockets of Russian troops scattered across the woods. Many retreating units moved blindly, unaware of where friendly forces were or where Ukrainian ambushes waited. By now, Russia's advance on Kyiv had lost its momentum entirely, trapped in a maze of Ukrainian resistance. Ukrainian defences strengthened daily, turning rural fields and forest lines into layered obstacles for the invaders. Every delay made Russian supply routes longer and more vulnerable, forcing desperate measures to keep units supplied. Ukraine targeted these thin supply lines relentlessly, isolating Russian formations until many became completely cut off. Cut off from resupply, many Russian soldiers endured freezing nights without shelter, fuel, or reliable communication. Ukraine used this exhaustion to its advantage, launching night raids that shattered already shaken morale. These raids destroyed ammunition, fuel, and command posts, leaving Russian forces unable to coordinate effectively. With their lines collapsing, many Russian units began abandoning heavy equipment to escape the tightening trap. Ukraine had halted the advance on Kyiv, slowed it, broken it, and now pushed it backward through frozen forests. By early March, the Russian offensive around Kyiv was exhausted, its forces scattered and increasingly disorganized. Ukrainian drone reconnaissance documented these scattered units, guiding ground forces to weak points in the retreat. Every retreating convoy left trails of damaged vehicles, marking the route of a collapsing advance. Ukrainian forces pushed behind the retreat, reclaiming towns that had endured the shock of the first assault. Some settlements had been fiercely contested, leaving burned homes and shattered roads behind the withdrawing troops. But each liberated street gave defenders evidence. Russia's advance had broken under the weight of its own failures. For the first time since the invasion began, Kyiv's defenders saw clear signs the enemy was pulling back. The push toward Kyiv had failed, and now Ukraine began reclaiming the land the enemy had fought so hard to seize. Ukrainian engineers cleared mines and debris from roads, opening routes for advancing units and humanitarian convoys. Villagers emerged cautiously, relieved yet shaken, offering information about Russian positions and abandoned equipment. These first-hand accounts help troops identify hidden traps, abandoned shelters, and escape routes used by retreating forces. Some areas revealed signs of fierce fighting: spent casings, burned trees, and trenches carved deep into frozen ground. As Ukrainian forces advanced, they encountered pockets of resistance, but most enemy troops were already in retreat. What had begun as a desperate defence was now a coordinated counteroffensive that reclaimed the village after village. Liberation brought relief, but also grief, as residents revealed the destruction left behind by occupation and retreat. Yet with each restored settlement, Ukraine strengthened its lines, pushing the enemy farther from the capital. With Russian forces retreating, Ukrainian units advanced deeper into contested forest zones north of Kyiv. Many positions had been hastily abandoned, leaving behind ammunition, documents, and damaged equipment. These findings revealed how badly Russia's advance had fractured under pressure and poor planning. Entire sectors showed signs of panic: abandoned trenches, half-dug fortifications, and scattered gear. Ukraine moved swiftly, reclaiming positions that Russia had taken in the first chaotic days of the invasion. As villages reopened, humanitarian teams followed, bringing medicine, warmth, and news of restored safety. Though battle scars remained, the return of Ukrainian control marked a turning point in the fight for the capital. For the first time since February, Kyiv felt protected, its defenders pushing the enemy farther from the city's heart. Russian forces attempted to regroup along northern roads, but their units were too depleted to regain momentum. Ukraine pressed forward, targeting weakened positions and reclaiming control of key junctions near Kyiv's outskirts. With every engagement, Russian forces lost more ground, often abandoning damaged armour rather than defend it. Many units retreated without coordination, scattering into forest routes that led only deeper into disarray. Ukrainian units captured dozens of vehicles, weapons and supplies, critical assets in the ongoing defence of Kyiv. Each captured route reopened the flow of humanitarian aid, bringing hope back to towns battered by weeks of fighting. Road by road, Ukraine restored control, pushing Russian forces farther into the forests and away from the capital. What had been a desperate stand was now a strategic reversal, the defenders turning invaders into the pursued. As March continued, Ukraine's counteroffensive intensified, pushing Russian forces far from the approaches to Kyiv. What remained of Russia's advance was a scattered line of wreckage: vehicles, trenches, and abandoned positions. Ukrainian investigators documented the devastation, gathering evidence of the battles that shaped Kyiv's survival. Every destroyed bridge, burned truck, and abandoned trench told the same story. The advance had collapsed. For Kyiv's defenders, victory meant more than survival. It meant proving the capital could not be taken easily. Families returned cautiously to their homes, finding ruins in some places. Yet hope remained stronger than the scars. Ukraine had not only defended its capital, it had shattered a far larger force and rewritten the battle's outcome. The world watched as Kyiv stood firm, its defenders turning what seemed impossible into a defining moment of courage.